Hello, I'm Brian Wilford, and welcome to MP Report. The other week I was in Afghanistan. It was my third visit to visit the troops in Kandahar and also to go to Kabul. In Kandahar, I had an opportunity to go to the Panjwai district where our troops are embedded with local Afghans. For example, 30 of them are in a small advanced post dealing with the local community, bringing both security and assisting in aid to that area of the Panjwai district. Very important to talk to the troops. As the Vice Chair of the Special Standing Committee in Afghanistan, it was my honor to talk to them, to talk to the commanding officer, to talk to generals from various other land forces who were there. Had an opportunity to go to Sarposa prison to again meet the general in charge of that prison, to talk about human rights issues, to talk about treatment of prisoners. Had an opportunity to visit the governor of Kandahar, Wessa, and we talked about good governance. We talked about delivery of programs by the Afghan government to the people of the Kandahar region. This is the most volatile region in Afghanistan. It is the home of the Taliban, and very clearly it was important for the Standing Committee to be able to go and to interact and to get the information that it needed. Also went to Kabul. And in Kabul, I met with General McChrystal, who's in charge of the international forces for Afghanistan, talked about the strategy, dealing particularly with governance. Now we have a strategy where there's the resources to go forward, issues on dealing with training of the Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police. Canadians are very much in the forefront in those areas. Talked to members of the Afghan Human Rights Commission, talked to women's groups, talked to members of Parliament. Again, very important about the rule of law. How are we evolving these institutions in Afghanistan? Because Canada is there not just from a military standpoint, which of course the combat role will end in Afghanistan in 2011, but also from the perspective of development. Also had the opportunity to meet with the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Afghanistan and with the Minister of Agriculture. 80% of Afghanistan is agricultural. And the key, of course, is to lessen the dependence on poppy crops and more on wheat and other foodstuffs, which of course are important both for export and for domestic consumption. And also, obviously, to curb the drug trade, of which 90%, by the way, of drugs grown in Afghanistan wind up in markets in Canada and the United States, unfortunately. Part of our trip, of course, was there to report back. And one of the areas that's clearly important is the issue of training. And we have committed, certainly the Liberal Party is committed, and the government is committed, to end the combat role in 2011. Where there is an opportunity, what we call inside the wire, in other words, not in the field of fighting, to train Afghan National Police or Afghan National Army, and we are doing some of it already, and still have a military presence there, is obviously going to be part of a public debate, both in the general public and obviously in Parliament. But there clearly is a need for training in order to de-emphasize the role of international forces and at the same time increase the role of the Afghan National Army in particular and police to ensure that they are a strong force and of course are trained in things like the rule of law. As the Vice Chair of the National Defense Committee, 2 days later I was asked to go to the Arctic as part of our Arctic study, and I was in the Northwest Territories and in Nunavut. And in the Northwest Territories, I met with the Canadian Rangers. These are many Inuit people who patrol our northern territories for Canada and are well equipped in terms of responding intelligence-wise and information-wise to authorities on ships that may be going through. Some of them obviously may be questionable. They can report back. Met with General Miller, who's in charge of Joint Task Force North. Also met with the Deputy Premier of the Northwest Territories and also with the Premier of Nunavut. Again, looking at issues of transportation, effective climate change on the North. We are making specific recommendations to the government on the issue of Arctic sovereignty, issues of drilling for oil, and of course, given the disaster in the Gulf Coast area, we obviously are very concerned about that and what kind of moratorium should be in place, and again, how to respond. So it's been a busy time for me in terms of those international and national opportunities to interact with key government leaders, key military leaders. I would like to now introduce to you Mike. Mike has been really behind-the-scenes person who has been doing all of the response newsletters, which many of you I know read very enthusiastically. And I'd like Mike to say a few words about what he does. Unfortunately, Mike will be going into the reserves and going up to Cold Lake, Alberta for the month of end of June, July, and August. But he has been a real asset to our office, and I'd like Mike to come up and say a few words. Mike?
Well, hello. My name is Mike, of course. And just to give you a quick idea on what I do and what my responsibilities entail as newsletter producer, my job is to communicate important issues, important matters to you as members of Richmond Hill, as citizens of York Region, of which I was born and raised, and certainly as Canadians, there are certain issues that do come up from time to time. And it is our responsibility as a Member of Parliament's office to communicate with you exactly what implications an issue might have, whether it's a disease coming up, whether it's an issue like crime or immigration or refugees. Certain issues do touch strike a chord within the Richmond Hill population and certainly within the Canadian population. And my job is simply to break it down, make it simple to understand, and of course, through Brian's voice, be able to communicate with you exactly what that means for you and certain things that you do need to know.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate all your great work. And I want to say that MP Report, again, Mike helps produce this. We happen to be in a committee room of the Justice Building where my office is located. And around the room are scenes of different parts of Canada. And again, I thank you for watching. And this has been Brian Wilford. This has been MP Report. Thank you very much.